Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's live stream. It's just myself and your good selves this evening. We haven't got a guest joining us. Probably because I've been tied up with something today for the next couple of days, so I haven't had time to really sort out a guest, but I've had time to look through what's been going on in the news and to get some things ready for us to talk about. So do fire comments in. I'll have more time than usual to engage with the comments. I had a quick look at the Scottish Parliament's programme today. Two committees, not one, but two committees, were looking at the assisted suicide legislation. So I'll catch up with that when I can and have a look what's going on in those committees, see what's been said, because it's obviously critically important legislation. So we'll see what's been going on there. The vote will happen, I think, in the autumn. It won't be too many weeks before we have the final vote on assisted suicide in Scotland. Obviously, as a family party, we utterly oppose that because we uphold the sanctity of life. If I had to give my primary reason for opposing this, I mean, one reason is just, I guess, that moral intuition. I just know it's wrong. Doctors giving poison to patients, it's just wrong. And the other reason is it is impossible to eliminate pressure. They say, oh, we've got enough safeguards, we can have enough measures in place so people don't feel pressurized to die. How can you have measures to do that? It's completely impossible. So, yeah, well, I will give you an update certainly before next week's live stream about what's been going on in the Parliament about assisted suicide, the Scottish Parliament that is. Now, there's been a lot going on in the news relevant to us, as ever. I've got quite a few Scottish stories. But again, in this live stream set, I'm going to continue to talk about the issue to do with Charlie Kirk, Donald Trump, and basically Christianity in politics, in American politics, and how that's playing out in UK politics as well. Because we've got a very strange situation developing in the family party. I mean, our policies are very much in tune with traditional Christian values. I mean, that's always been at the core of our policies. But we haven't particularly said, vote for us because we're a Christian party. We say, here are our policies in the hope that they'll appeal to everyone. And we also hope that Christians will look at that and think, oh, yeah, that's in accord with Christian teaching. I want to support that. So it's a bit funny. So our policies really are in accord with Christian teaching. But what's happening now is increasingly there are other political voices being labelled and labelling themselves as Christian, but then their policies and their views, some of them are not aligned with Christian values. So it's quite interesting. So the family party, with policies genuinely based on Christian values, but we don't particularly promote them on that basis. But then you've got other people who are promoting themselves as Christians, as the Christian voice, the Christian influence in politics, but their policies are not really based on Christian values. I mean, it's not that black and white, but I'll talk about that a bit later. It's a very, very interesting development, and there's lots to say about it. But right, let's kick off with a few things going on in Scotland. I mean, this is just a routine story. I mean, I can make this a standing item virtually every week. Latest SNP activist involved in some dubious activities. You don't need to say any more than that. But it really is remarkable the number of politicians that are found to be involved in dubious activities. It tends to apply across parties, but seems to particularly apply in the SNP to a remarkable degree. But I sometimes wonder, how do these parties recruit people? I mean, what's their selection criteria? What is it a party has to do to attract such a disproportionate number of people who get involved in sort of dubious activities? I genuinely don't understand it. I genuinely don't understand how it happens. I'm sure if you took just a random selection of people from the nation, you wouldn't have as high an incidence of these sort of cases as you do within political parties. And it seems to me, particularly with the SNP. So, yeah, that's a sort of business as usual story. Toddlers to be taught about democracy now. Now, this has been down in England. It's interesting because you see a lot of things you see happening in England under the Labour government. We look at it from Scotland and think, yeah, we've had that for years. That's what they've been trying to do in Scotland, or have been doing in Scotland for years. So we see the same ideology that's been dominant in Scotland for decades, really, now being implemented more in England. So toddlers to be taught about democracy. Now, what do you think when you hear that? I mean, part of me thinks, okay, yeah, I'm learning about the democratic system. That seems quite helpful. But for toddlers, And isn't that a bit advanced? And they need to be able to, learn to count and spell a few words, that sort of thing. First, learn the days of the week, maybe, count up to 20, this sort of thing. So we've been taught about democracy. It seems a bit out of place with such young children. But then actually imagine what would happen. So how would you teach a toddler about democracy? And we're talking toddlers. I mean, their understanding is going to be very limited. You've really got to simplify to an extreme degree to communicate any idea of democracy to 2-year-olds. So what would the message be? The message was going to turn into something like, we don't just tell people to do things, we decide together and the majority gets their way. Is that a good message for toddlers? No. A good message for toddlers is mum and dad look after you and they care for you and they love you. And you have to do as you're told by mum and dad, because basically they know best. They look after you and they decide what's safe and helpful or whatever for you to do. So you need to do what mum and dad say. Teaching about democracy, I think it might undermine that. And I think the people who will be pushing this will know exactly what they are doing. Well, Lawrence, democracy, so the kids feel empowered, so they're on the same level as adults. Spot on. Absolutely spot on. That's exactly what they're trying to do. So put your toys away. Well, let's take a vote on that, shall we? Me and my brother, we say no. Mum says yes. 2-1. Bad luck, Mum. The toys are staying out. Democracy in action. That's the way things should be. Now, obviously, that's a flippant example, but that's the sort of thinking that is behind it. Teaching them how to throw the rattle out of the pram. Yes. Yeah, that's another way of thinking about it as well. Yeah. So it's just undermining adult authority in general, parental authority in particular. So we've seen this in Scotland for a long, long time. I would say, modesty aside, I've been at the forefront of challenging this. And Stuart Waiton as well, Scottish Union for Education, has been on the case. But you see the same thing going down to England. And it's interesting, this is reported in the Telegraph, yet the Telegraph article doesn't really bring in a skeptical perspective on it. It's quite accepting, just seen as a bit of a curiosity there. So they haven't quite seen through what's going on here yet. There's something else in the news worth a mention. Scotland's not proven verdict to be scrapped. So there's been a reform of the criminal justice system, and other aspects as well. But the not proven verdict has gone. So formally in Scotland, a jury could decide that the accused was guilty, it's obvious what that means, or not guilty, or not proven. Now, not guilty and not proven, what was the difference between them? Well, no one seemed to quite know. They both basically meant, okay, you're not guilty, really. But the way it sounds to people is it sounds like not proven, sounds a bit like, well, we're not saying you didn't do it, but, well, we haven't managed to prove it. But technically, it means the same as not guilty. Now, this verdict's gone. Apparently, it was a historical peculiarity. It wasn't something that some legal experts in Scotland said, all right, we think this would be a good idea. It just ended up as a hangover from some changes in the past. One of the arguments for keeping it, which I found quite persuasive, is in Scotland, a majority verdict can be 8-7. You have 15 people on the jury, so 8-7 majority. So that's a pretty fine margin. Whereas in England, with 12 jurors, to get a majority, you've got to get 7-5, which proportionally is a bigger difference. So a Scottish jury can be balanced on a knife edge, 8-7, and can find guilty. And I think that some people argue, well, some people definitely argue, that with a not proven thing, if you've got a very tightly balanced case, that maybe the option of not proven could tip a jury from saying, okay, we're not quite sure, so we're not going to say no, not guilty, we'll say not proven then. So it sort of counterbalances the fact that you can be convicted on such a narrow margin in a Scottish court. But anyway, that's gone. The MSPs have voted to remove that. To be honest, I haven't got a particularly strong opinion on it. I certainly think the argument I've just outlined, there's something in it. I think that is a valid argument. But overall, not sure. Something we are thinking about for the family party, though, this is the first time I've aired this view, I think, publicly, is for civil cases in particular to change the legal system and make it more like the system in most continental European countries. Because what happens in Scotland with a civil case is one party arrives with their lawyer to argue their case. The lawyer costing a fortune. Another party on the other side arrives with their lawyer costing a fortune to argue their case. And then the sheriff or the judge is basically just the referee. They just make sure there's fair play between them, and then at the end that the sheriff will or the judge will make their mind up. So basically it costs a fortune. You can't really go to the court without, at the very least, even if you represent yourself, you're risking the expenses incurred by the other side. So it's very high stakes and massive amounts of money involved. Whereas what would happen in a lot of European countries is you'd go to the judge. You could go with a lawyer, you could have legal advice, you could just go yourself. So you turn up, the other person turns up, the other party turns up, they sit down with the judge, and the judge says, okay, tell me about it, you tell me about that. Then the judge questions the people, the judge says what other information he wants to know, and basically the judge acts as a lawyer for both parties, if you like. So the judge isn't just the referee through the process. The judge's mission is to see justice done and to make sure that the arguments are looked into carefully, all the information is gathered. So the judge sort of acts as the lawyer for both sides and then comes to a conclusion. Now, I think that's just a much better system because it takes away a huge barrier to justice and generator of injustice, which are the legal costs. Because you can have cases where the actual amount of money at stake can be relatively small, but the legal costs can absolutely dwarf it. Whereas in other European countries, that isn't what happens. So that's something we're looking at. I think, as far as I'm aware, it's a totally original policy in the United Kingdom, but we will explore that more as we get towards the election manifesto. Right, Mr. Tars says, so Sturgeon guilty or not of campervan fraud because it was not proven before? Right, good question. What's happening with all these cases about the SNP? I think the important thing is, whatever happens, it's taken so long, it saved the SNP from embarrassment. So you've got a party that, well, seems like very serious malpractice going on. Whether it's illegal or not, we will wait to see. But some very shady practice. Nicola Sturgeon obviously been dishonest about some matters as well, like their membership, the state of their finances. So very serious matters. Ends up going to court, but the process is so slow. But by the time, Peter Murrell might be convicted, he might not. But whatever happens, by the time it happens, it won't really affect the SNP because all those people are history. Then something doesn't seem quite right about that to me. If you've got a political party that ends up mired in that sort of scandal, they really should pay the price. Whereas if you've got a legal system that takes so long that actually the party doesn't pay a price, well, I don't know. Doesn't seem right to me. Right, let's move on. What else have we got? All right. I can't remember what I did since last live stream, but I've now made 2 videos about absolutely terrible articles in the Scottish press about Charlie Kirk. I think maybe I mentioned this one last year, written by a transgender Green Party candidate in the election next year. But then the Herald published one as well by their education expert. I've made a video about it. This education expert said that they thought that Charlie Kirk's influence would result in more attacks on women and girls in schools. It's really quite frightening to read. It's quite frightening to read how someone can have views so divorced from reality, so based on misinterpretations, misconceptions, and this other person hasn't made any effort at all to actually hear what a person's like and what they've got to say. Or if they have made the effort, they're willfully distorting it. And one of the big conclusions I came from this article in the Herald was that basically when the Herald look at the family party, they think that's what we're like. They think that we are like stoking up violence against women and girls somehow, even though absolutely the opposite is true. Absolute opposite. And yet it's just a strange experience to know that people think these things about you and to know that they're totally untrue. And it's very difficult to do anything about it. So I emailed the Herald journalist. I wrote a letter to the Herald about it. They didn't publish it. And I made my video about it. So I sent the 2 things to the Herald journalist and said, can we talk about it? How about come on the live stream, let's debate it, or in person. And I said, even if you don't want to do anything in front of camera, I'd be happy to meet up sometime and have a chat about it. And I feel like I've said this quite a few times in the live stream. Guess what the answer was? Guess what the answer was? The answer, of course, was no answer, no reply. I mean, it's very frustrating. I do write such letters quite often, inviting people to discuss, etc. No reply at all. Right, let's have a look at this next question. The question: why has it taken the Honourable Judge Lady Smith since 2014 to investigate Scottish child abuse and still not given any conclusion? Good question. I mean, to be honest, the volume of material that the Scottish Child Abuse Inquiry is getting through is absolutely colossal. Okay, they're going through that school by school, institution by institution, and hearing from witnesses that will take several hours each. So the amount of work is absolutely huge. I mean, the cost of it will be astronomical. I haven't heard a cost. I mean, it will be surely tens of millions of pounds. But yeah, I mean, hopefully that will come to a conclusion soon. In terms of learning lessons from it, I'm inclined to think, hopefully, I'm having second thoughts as I'm saying this. Part of me thinks there was a child protection revolution some years ago now. When are we talking about? We're talking about maybe the mid 2000s, early 2000s, when basically the idea of a child protection officer was invented. And the reason for that was, in any organization, someone always knew that there was someone they could go to, and that person wouldn't try and cover it up. If you're I was a child protection officer in a school once, and I knew basically I had one job. My job was to listen to any concerns and then to decide, do I need to report them to social work or to the police? And if I wasn't sure, you phone them up and have a chat. I mean, as it happened, in the period I was doing this, I never even needed to phone up for a chat, but that's your job. And so once you've got this person who's going to make sure things are not covered up, and that the culture changed in other institutions. So you would think that it's much more difficult to get away with that sort of thing now. But maybe there's still a lot going on. I don't know. So part of me feels that the Scottish Child Abuse Inquiry is looking into something that to some degree has already been dealt with to some extent. I don't know. But I think to some degree that is the case. I would imagine a lot of the things they'll be hearing about, the institutions involved have genuinely learnt their lessons from them. I think. But anyway, that's going off at a tangent. Interesting point, though. It's been going on 11 years up to now. Yeah, that is a long time. Right, let's right, that's an interesting story. This came again from listening to Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk, now I watched a few clips. I wasn't very familiar with him until he was murdered. But he was talking about some of the legal challenges that go on in America where there's not the right proportion of black people and white people or whatever, different races. So I had a little look into it about how this has worked out in Britain. And I came across a case here that involved the Home Office. And what happened in this case was the Home Office, the UK government department, had a test for people who wanted to apply for the higher level positions. And this test was a test of communication skills, interpersonal skills, etc. Analyzing problems. So just basic, straightforward skills. Nothing cultural about it or whatever. Just a straightforward test of qualities that the Home Office thought were necessary in order to perform these higher level tasks. So they administered the test. People who passed it could maybe get one of the higher level jobs, etc. I mean, really straightforward. Then what happened? Someone came along and looked at the results and said, actually, black people are underrepresented, black and minority ethnic people are underrepresented in people who pass the test, as are older people. Now, older people, and to be honest, your peak brain power is about 28 years old. So as you're getting more mature, maybe in some cases, you're not quite as sharp as you used to be, and maybe that affected the test results. Different races, what reason was that? Who knows? Who knows what reason there were? But there was nothing wrong with the test. So anyway, so someone thought they spotted a chance, got a lawyer on the case, and took the Home Office to court and said, this is basically you're discriminating on race, because you're administering a test that results in fewer black and minority ethnic people being able to get the job. So your test must be racist somehow. Your test is discriminatory. So the Home Office said, there's nothing discriminatory about our test. How could it be discriminatory? It's just like logic problems and language. I mean, there's nothing discriminatory about it. And so it went to court. And it went all the way up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, yes, your test is discriminatory. And the Supreme Court said, you don't need the accuser, the claimants, they don't need to explain how it's discriminatory. Just the fact that a higher proportion of black and minority ethnic people and older people fail it, that's enough to confirm that this test is racist, basically. It's racial, discriminating on the basis of race. So the Home Office could then try and defend themselves on the ground that the test was justified, which was obvious already. But then the case sort of collapsed for various reasons, and the Home Office ended up paying out £1 million to some of the claimants, I assume who had failed the test. I mean, how about that? I mean, that whole story is just totally wrong from day one. From day one. I mean, if we try and simplify it, let's say you've got a test for people who are going to go and work in your statistics office, and you give them a test of numeracy, numerical skills, statistics even. But then it's found that people of different races, some people of certain races don't do as well, then your test's racist and you can't do it. Now, I understand what's happening in America. It's basically that IQ tests are racist, so you can't use them. So if you're recruiting someone for a job, then you can't use their SAT scores, as they call them in America, which is not too far off being an IQ test. You can't use those because that's racist. So what's then happening in America is they're using the university you went to as a proxy for ability, because the universities can test their applicants. So looking at what university someone went to is about the only way to get a handle on how good they are, how intelligent they are. It's a really bizarre situation. So Charlie Kirk was challenged in America, and that's just an example of the sort of thing that's gone on in Britain. So they paid out £1 million. What were the legal costs, I wonder? Probably more again. Anyway, family party position, meritocracy. If you have a test, then some people will pass it, some people won't. That's fine. That's just the way it is. Right. Right. This is a little aside. Remember, we were talking about the Tommy Robinson rally last week. I had all sorts of things to say about that. One of the gentlemen speaking, I showed a bit of a video clip about him. He was the one who said, we need to get back to celebrating effing Christmas or something like that. But one of the things he said was he remembered singing a hymn when he was at school. He said, "When a knight won his spurs." I thought, I remember that. We used to sing that at school. And I don't think I've ever heard it since. So it must have been quite well known, I don't know, in the 1970s when I was at primary school or whatever. So I just thought I'd look it up. But what was this all about? What's happened to it? So here it is. When a knight won his spurs in the stories of old, he was gentle and brave, he was gallant and bold. With a shield on his arm and a lance in his hand, for God and for valour, he rode through the land. I quite like that. That's pretty good. So imagine you're a boy in school. Now, in Scottish schools, people generally don't even begin to think about that. Everything just suits the girls, and that's the mainstream. So imagine yourself as a little boy listening. When a knight won his spurs in the story zone, gallant and brave, gallant and bold, gentle and brave. Shield, so we've got weapons, and is going to be brave and ride through the land. So it's quite a sort of masculine message there. Is that something that would maybe appeal to boys? You've got to be gentle and gallant, but you've also got to be brave as well. There's a bit of fighting to do around here. Right, no charger have I and no sword by my side, yet still to adventure and battle I ride. Though back into Storyland, giants have fled, and the knights are no more, and the dragons are dead. So, you're not a knight. There's not talking about physical fighting, but still there's an adventure and there's a battle. So your life is to involve, say, an adventure and battles and fights against, well, not giants. So what? Let's see what comes next. Let faith be my shield, and let joy be my steed against the demons of anger, the ogres of greed, and let me set free with the sword of my youth from the castle of darkness, the power of the truth. I thought, that's great. Oh, what a really good message. So, you've got fights to go and battle, but the fights are moral battles. You've got to fight evils, if you like, within yourself, you'd assume, anger and greed, fight evils within yourself and around us as well. So what a great little song. I'm not suggesting it should be reinstated. I don't know if the language might be a bit archaic. But I thought that was a good one. Certainly the type of message in it is something that we could do with more of. We could do with more of that in churches and in schools as well. Okay. Robert, Supreme Court should be abolished, go back to the law lords. A lot of people hold that opinion. I haven't really thought it through either way, but I know a lot of people do think that. Often the Supreme Court has been the court that's applied some common sense and has got something right. Often. Not always, but often. But I think we shouldn't base our decision on whether or not to have a Supreme Court on whether or not we like the outcomes it produces. We've got to have a lot more to it than that. So, I'll be interested to hear your view on that, Robert, sometime. You could explain why you think that, and maybe that could become one of our policies. Feudal people. Yeah, okay. Labour created Supreme Court, filled it with their cronies. And then basically the judges are appointed through an open process. If you're a High Court judge with a certain number of years' experience, you can apply to be a Supreme Court judge. I don't think there are any more. Well, I would say they appear to be less biased, less progressive bias than the lower courts, which could be a reflection of an aging legal profession. So basically, the slightly younger ones tend to be a bit more hardline progressive biased, maybe, and maybe some of the older ones in the Supreme Court, maybe a bit more balanced. Maybe there's an element of that. It would seem sensible for there to be, wouldn't it? So we shall see. Right. And I just thought I'd touch on this one. So Trump, I was just going to say Trump's in the news. That'd be a really stupid thing to say, shouldn't it? I mean, when is Trump not in the news? But this is something I find interesting. There's something about medicine and medical science that tends to attract unorthodox views. Now, I think, as in anywhere, unorthodox views can be very helpful because they can draw, any new idea, when it's first floated, it's unorthodox. So people who float unusual ideas, I think that can often be very helpful. But then what needs to come after then is to try and nail it down and get proper evidence to see if it's true or not. But I think in the field of medicine, that sometimes doesn't happen. Sometimes people like to believe something that the evidence isn't actually behind. And people are saying that this is what's going on with Trump in this case. Now, my attitude to all these things is just, I don't care if it's Trump saying it. I don't care. I just want to see the evidence. Where is the best evidence? Where's the strongest evidence for something? Sometimes there can be a study that seems to show something, but then a much better study, much bigger and more reliable study will show, well, no, that's not true. But just the smaller study, the less reliable one, can be enough to persuade someone who's not so scientifically literate, shall we say. And so it's been interesting to see that. I think it's partly with RFK coming into the government. RFK, when he was campaigning with his own party, the reputation was it was a very heterodox party. Some very unorthodox views were involved in that party, and he's now brought them into the government of the United States of America. So it's interesting. So what he's doing with that Make America Healthy Again, some of the things I think, oh, yeah, sounds good. And being the Trump administration, they'll really go for it and really actually do it and make some progress with it. Then other things I think, well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure quite what the basis for that is. But anyway, moving on. I'll maybe miss that story for now. Maybe save it for next week because we've got a lot more to talk about. That is Jimmy Kimmel, isn't it? So Jimmy Kimmel, they've been in the news because he was cancelled by his broadcast network on his late night show. And all I wanted to mention about this is it's been one of those stories where the media coverage has been a bit divorced from the reality of what's gone on. So Jimmy Kimmel, after Charlie Kirk's death, he made a statement that was extremely insensitive. But the really important thing is he said basically the shooter was far right. The shooter was a MAGA supporter, which is just not true. It's not true. And at the point where he said it, it wasn't that there was good evidence that that was the case. There has never been evidence that that's the case. So we basically, in a very sensitive moment, he said something that wasn't true. And I think that's the main reason why the network said, we can't have this. Basically, we're going to get sued if you go around saying things that are not true. And as in Britain, if you're a broadcaster, the GB News have found out this a bit as well. If you have people saying things that are not true, then the regulators will say, we'll take away your license. You can't say that. You can't be broadcasting things that are not true, which is good. And we need that sort of regulation. How that's supposed to work on social media, I do not know. So what happened is he said something that wasn't true. His broadcaster cancelled the show. And Trump said, basically, if you're not careful, we'll take away your license. Now, actually, that's not that unreasonable thing to say, because the issue here is saying something that's not true. But the way the story is being presented is that Trump said, I don't like what you said. You disagree with my views. Therefore, I'll take away your license. Trump being acting in a sort of autocratic way. But it's just not true. It's not true. The heart of the matter is that he said something that wasn't true. And therefore, some action needed to be taken. Absolutely. So what he said was totally untrue. But it's just interesting to see how a story breaks free of the reality of it, takes on a life of its own, and travels around the world. Right, this is my big theme to talk about tonight. Yeah, you might have written read the little article I wrote about this a couple of days ago, because it's fascinating what's going on in Britain and around the world. Now look at that picture there. That's at Tommy Robinson's rally. What do I think about Tommy Robinson? Lots of things, but I can't go over all that again. But there are a lot of crosses there, wooden crosses at Tommy Robinson's rally, and there's a lot of talk about, we need to get back to Christian values. We're a Christian nation. We need to recover this. And then, Nigel Farage talks about Christian values, Judeo-Christian values quite a bit. I'll just play a little clip as well to show what else I mean. This is a GB News journalist asking Donald Trump a question. Here we go.
I've got to come back.
Better turn at GB News. Thank you. Having been in DC for a few weeks, it's really interesting to see how you run the country as a proud Christian leader.
I mean, how about that? So the GB News journalist asked Donald Trump. It's basically says you're a proud Christian leader. Now, on what basis? I mean, as far as I'm aware, Donald Trump doesn't call himself a Christian. I mean, he will be very positive about Christianity, and he realizes which side his bread's buttered. Got a lot of support from Christians, and yes, a lot of his policies are in line with Christian teaching. I think some others you could debate, but some of his policies are very much in line with that. But Donald Trump is someone, I say, who doesn't even really claim to be a Christian, and yet the GB News journalist is saying you're a proud Christian leader. And then you got Tommy Robinson. Now, I've heard various stories of Tommy Robinson going to church, maybe even become a Christian. I mean, if that's happening, brilliant. I mean, that's great. Obviously, that's good news for anyone from my perspective as a Christian. And then you've got Nigel Farage as well. Nigel Farage doesn't claim to be a Christian. I mean, he will talk warmly about Christian values and Christian culture, but he personally doesn't claim to be a Christian. Now, in pointing those things out, I obviously aren't saying, so Trump and Tommy Robinson, Nigel Farage, they're really bad people because they're not Christians. I'm just pointing out that they're not Christian. They're talking about Christianity a lot, but they're not Christians, which is quite an unusual situation. Because as I said at the beginning, it was the family party. I mean, to be honest, most of the people involved in the family party are Christians, and our policies are very much reflect Christian teaching as we understand it. So it's a bit strange that the family party, whose policies actually do reflect Christian teaching, most of the people in it leadership, etc. They are actually Christians. But then you've got another group of leaders who are not Christians, whose policies don't align with Christian teaching in lots of areas, like pro-life, for example. But they're the ones talking about Christianity a lot. So that's a bit of a challenge for the family party, isn't it? Because in politics, the people who are talking most about Christianity are not the Christians and not the ones promoting Christian values. So what do we do about that? I think what we do about that is we try and convey to people that this is what's going on, and that this is what we are in the family party, just to help people to understand what is happening. Now, my little article I wrote there said the right wants to hijack Christianity, but the left already has. So on the one hand, we've got the right wing of politics increasingly aligning itself with Christian values and Christian symbols. Is that a good thing? In a lot of ways, it's a very good thing. In other ways, it's not a good thing. It's not good if people get confused about what Christianity is, and they think right-wing politics and Christianity are the same thing. That's not good at all. But what's good about it is you've got people who are recognizing the value in Christianity in one way or another, and surely those people are more likely to become Christians, that they're going to be more open to becoming Christians. So we welcome that. I mean, same with Trump, Tommy Robinson, Nigel Farage. Again, they will be coming into contact with quite a few Christians, and they'll be hearing Christian message. So maybe they'll respond to that one day. That would be great. Let's hope so. So the right of politics is becoming increasingly aligned with Christianity. Obviously, in America, it's to a far greater extent, and that's partly what's influencing it here. I mean, just to talk about Charlie Kirk, there was like the anti-immigration, freedom of speech mixture of issues, not quite sure what it was, but it's anti-immigration really, protest in Glasgow last Saturday. They had like an RIP Charlie Kirk banner there. Now, that's interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, a lot of the things Charlie Kirk stood for, I say, was like marriage and life were very big issues for him. We would talk about them endlessly. And yet the rally in Glasgow, they wouldn't be interested in those things at all. And yet they want to put Charlie Kirk front and center because they think he's sort of on their side, sort of right wing. So things are getting quite confused. But then what's going on with like mainstream church tends to be quite aligned with the political left. In my article, I described it as an abusive relationship, in that a lot of Christians and churches are forever pandering to the political left, trying to cozy up to them, trying to be friends, basically. And I'm not saying, well, I'll come to that in a minute. But then what do they get in return? They got hostility to the point of persecution. It's like the church is saying to the political left, oh, please, can we be friends? We really think you're great. Can we work together? Can we be friends? And the political left says, oh, great, yeah, vote for us. That's brilliant. But by the way, we really can't stand your values, and we're heading towards increasingly persecuting you, and we're trying to stamp out your views. And the church's response tends to be, oh, please be our friend. We agree with you on some other issues, but please come be friends. Now, when it comes to Christian teaching, left and right it doesn't divide like that. There are some left-wing causes that align with Christian teaching. There are some causes that are regarded as right-wing that align with Christian teaching. So anyone who thinks Christianity is left-wing or right-wing, I think that's a very superficial view of the breadth of Christian teaching, very superficial indeed. And the danger is we're heading into a stage where you've got, I would say that the majority of churches, they regard Christianity or left-wing politics as being synonymous almost, very closely tied together, left-wing syncretism. And increasingly, we're also getting a political movement that's wanting to associate itself with Christianity. So I say there are opportunities here, massive opportunities, a lot of it's very positive, but there are also a lot of risks as well. And there's the possibility that a lot of Christians in particular could get quite confused and start thinking of a political ideology as part of their faith. Another one is people thinking, who are not Christians, thinking their political ideology is the faith, is Christian faith. So it feels like a very challenging situation, and it's one into which we need to speak some clarity and some balanced truth, which is what we've been trying to do with this, trying very hard to do. Now, of course, it's quite dangerous territory, because as soon as I say something about Donald Trump, for example, there are some people in Britain who are very devoted to Donald Trump. and they really don't like to hear him criticized. Similarly with Tommy Robinson, some people might like Tommy Robinson, and if they hear a balanced view, a pros and cons view, or whatever, then they're really not very happy about that. But we think on these issues that it really needs to happen, because that is the case. There are positives and negatives with these characters and with these movements. Right. Let's have a look. Hello, Mr. or Mrs. Bop. The church if the church as an institution rejects us, it's okay. Now that's interesting, because I feel sometimes as a social conservative, in other words, someone who upholds values that basically are rooted in traditional Christian teaching, I feel sometimes that, a bit rejected and excluded from the church. And what do I think about that? Well, I think, I'm confident that what I believe in these areas does actually reflect Christian teaching. And I believe in some cases, I'm speaking in generalities, but you realize that, don't you? But in many cases, churches have like rejected their own values. It's not necessarily that they don't believe them anymore. It's just that they don't want to talk about them, and they're a bit hostile towards anyone who actually does want to talk about them. They're like the church's trade secret. Okay, we've got these beliefs, but we'd rather not talk about them, and we'd rather you didn't talk about them either. So, yep. Right. Robert, that's a very perceptive way of putting it. Yep. Social gospel versus Christian nationalism. Social gospel, which is a focus on like helping the poor, that sort of thing, dealing with social issues of that type, which is absolutely in line with Christian teaching. Christian nationalism, well, basically no one really knows what it means. But I guess a big part of it is the idea that we are a Christian nation. Now, I'm not quite sure what a Christian nation is. I'm not quite sure what that means. I'm not quite sure if declaring yourself a Christian nation when most people are not Christians, I'm not sure that's helpful. I'm not sure it's helpful even when most people are Christians. I guess the parallel is, do you want Muslim majority countries to declare themselves as a Muslim country? So imagine you lived in a country with a majority of Muslims, and the government said, we are a Muslim country. We declare this is an Islamic state. How would you feel? Oh, that's fine. The Muslims are majority, so yeah, they want to be an Islamic state. That's fine by me. Would you feel that? Well, not sure they would be doing that, because the American Constitution, interestingly, is not explicitly Christian. So if your politicians want to talk about Christianity, then fine, but it's not in the Constitution. And I tend to think that's the way it should be. I don't think many people would say, they're short of Christian influence in American politics. I mean, there's plenty of it, but it's not official. It's not like declared a Christian nation. But that's a trickier question. We'll talk about that more another day. Yeah, so let's have a look at another couple of things along this line. I'm going to show you this clip. You would almost certainly have seen this, but it's very short. This is Charlie Kirk's widow, Erica, expressing forgiveness for her husband's killer. Then after them, I'm going to play Donald Trump's response to it, and we'll see what we make of this. So here we go.
A Utah hospital to do the unthinkable, to look directly at my husband's murdered body. Father, forgive them, for they not know what they do. I forgive him.
He did not hate his opponents. He wanted the best for them. That's where I disagreed with Charlie. I hate my opponent, and I don't want the best for them. I'm sorry. I am sorry, Erica.
That was interesting, wasn't it? Really interesting. I think that shows the divide, even like, within the MAGA movement. You've got Charlie Kirk and Erica there, who basically embodied Christian values. They understood them, and that had molded their character. Okay, I'm not saying they were perfect, but you can see that. Whereas Trump doesn't share those values. Now, with Trump, some weeks I'll be thinking, oh, that's really great what he's doing. Some weeks I'm thinking, oh, that's not so good. But listen to what he's saying there. whatever you think of it, whether you agree with it or not, the fact is it's totally out of tune with like Christian thinking there. The other thing I would say as well, to contradict Charlie Kirk's widow, to directly contradict her in the memorial service, I mean, really, that was quite an extreme thing to do. So I think it's really apparent now. It's making it clear that you've got, Charlie Kirk, genuine Christian values driving what he's doing. He is a Christian. Now, you might disagree with him on lots of things. Okay, that's fine. But basically, a Christian in politics, and he had his political views on various things, and he also had a set of moral values that were founded in his Christian faith. And then you've got Donald Trump, part of the same movement, but Donald Trump would overlap with Charlie on some issues, but then not on others. But Donald Trump clearly actually isn't a Christian. But then you get GB News asking Donald Trump, basically saying to him, "You're a proud Christian leader." You just think, well, it's just bizarre what's going on. This is a new thing. I mean, this wasn't going on a few years ago. So GB News feel they're in a position to decide which leaders are Christian leaders, and then they decide that Donald Trump is a Christian leader. I mean, it's really confused and muddly, isn't it? But these are the waters we're entering into. It's very interesting what's happening. I think overall good should come out of it, but part of our mission as a family party is to help people keep their balance and to keep a broader picture and not be sucked into sort of extremes and confusions on this whole issue. Right, let's carry on now, actually. So this is the rest of the press conference. So let's go back to the beginning with the GB News reporter.
It begs a question to the Prime Minister.
A question? I've got to come back.
Let's turn to GB News. Thank you. Having been in DC for a few weeks, it's really interesting to see how you run the country as a proud Christian leader. And it really begs the question to the Prime Minister, if you don't mind, are we still a Christian country? But also...
when you say we, are you talking here or...?
Here. The
Here?
UK. I'm still British. I might live in America. I'm still British. But also,
I can't give you that answer.
That's for the Prime Minister. But also, despite what we talked about in Scotland a few weeks ago, we still have 12,000 people a year here being arrested for social media posts, for free speech violations. Does that not remain an important area that there is still a lot of disagreement on?
I'd like to have you answer that.
Yeah, look, I mean, in terms of a Christian country, I was christened, so that is, my church has been all my life, and we are, that is wired into our informal constitution. Of course, we celebrate many other faiths as well, and I'm really proud that we're able to do so as a country. And on free...
I mean, that was sort of incoherent, wasn't it? It's as though it just hadn't got an answer ready for that question. So his answer was a muddle. What would I have said if I was the Prime Minister? Right, what would I have said? Well, there's a formal answer. I mean, technically, Britain has an established church, so in that sense, there are elements of the Constitution that make it a Christian nation. So you can answer on that basis. What else would I want to say? Well, I think it's a very difficult question. It's a difficult question. I think I'm probably not a person that just thinks whatever something is, if you can put the word Christian in front of it, then that's a good thing. So if you've got a car, it'd be better still to have a Christian car. A Christian car? What's a Christian car? I mean, a little cross on the front or Bible verse on the side or whatever. I don't know what a Christian car is. Same with a Christian nation as well. Now, I think the important thing for a nation, from a Christian point of view, is the way it conducts itself. And what the people are doing. If the people are worshipping God and living faithful godly lives, then that's very significant. If the leaders are doing the same, I think that's a very significant factor for the nation. But I think the declaration of being a Christian nation is much more difficult, much less straightforward. So I say, if your leaders are upholding good values and the people in the country are, then all to the good. Okay, let's carry on to the freedom of speech bit.
Speech That has long lived in this country, free speech. It's one of the founding values of the United Kingdom, and we protect it jealously and fiercely, and always will, and we will bear down on any limits on free speech. I draw a limit between free speech and the speech of those that want to peddle paedophilia and suicide social media to children, and therefore I'm all for free speech. I'm also for protecting children from things that will harm them, paedophiles, those that peddle suicide, which has had a terrible consequence for individual, particularly teenagers. And so that's the balance we strike. But we have had freedom of speech in this country for a very long time, and we will always protect it.
Thank you.
It's interesting watching Trump, listening to him then. He was really eyeballing him through that, wasn't he? I mean, what an answer. I mean, Keir Starmer knows full well that the controversies over freedom of speech in Britain are not to do with paedophilia and suicide promotion. They're not the issues. It's much, much broader than that. So I think it's a bit disingenuous for Keir Starmer to say, oh, you see, this is the real issue. But going back to the question, 12,000 people arrested for social media posts. I mean, that is outrageous. And I'd imagine a substantial majority of those, there's no way the person should have been arrested. Having said that, the line that, oh, someone got arrested just for a tweet, how ridiculous could that be? Well, actually, you need to know a bit more than that. Sometimes it's perfectly reasonable for the police to arrest someone for a tweet. But if I tweeted, I'm going to go around to your house tonight, and I'm going to set it on fire, and I'm going to come in and stab everybody, then the police come and arrest me, and I'd say, oh, I got arrested just for a tweet. Oh, what's going on? What about freedom of speech? It was only a tweet. Because obviously, the content of a tweet, the same as the content of any other sort of communication, can validly be a crime and ought to be a crime. But the vast majority of these cases they're talking about here absolutely should not be. John, I mean, quite right. I mean, Starmer would have nothing to say about that, would he? And that's one of the areas where J.D. Vance in particular is hot on the buffer zones. He really does not like the idea of the buffer zones. And the reason is because J.D. Vance really is pro-life. So he's pretty hot on that topic. Keir Starmer tries to skate over it all, but the problems remain. Let's carry on here. Let's see what else we go to. That's my bit about, I say, the sort of Christian nationalist, Christian right-wing, left-wing thing. It's a huge shift that's going on. And partly it's been imported from America, but partly it's coming in Britain too. And just to reiterate, huge opportunity, I think. But I would just urge and hope to be able to help people to keep their balance and to see things clearly. Right, a little story in Edinburgh. This is St George's School, girls' school in Edinburgh. Their junior school building, Lansdowne House. Basically, their numbers are low, particularly at the lower end. So they've sold this little campus near to their main campus, and it's going to become, guess what, a sort of nursing home, old people's home of some description. I mean, that's indicative of the direction of travel, isn't it? Schools, not enough pupils, well, partly because of the Labour government as well, but also just falling numbers of pupils, and becomes an old people's home. That's the demographic change that is underway. Right. St George's turned into a house of multiple occupancy. Well, they're not quite there yet, but let's see. Church closing during COVID woke a lot of people up. I agree. I think a lot of people took an interest in politics and freedom issues from that point. I believe Trump is a Christian and believes he just needs to work on his vices, particularly pride, work on his humility and fruits of the Spirit. I would say, my line basically, that's interesting. You say that. My line generally is if someone claims to be a Christian, I don't tend to disagree with them. So when John Swinney says he's a Christian, I don't say, no, he's not. What I'll say is, okay, John Swinney says he's a Christian, but let's look at his policies and viewpoints and basically that they're wrong, that they don't align with Christian teaching. So generally, I say if someone's claiming to be a Christian, I don't say they're not, because that's sort of not my job. That's God's job, if you like. But I would say with Trump is he doesn't claim to be a Christian. I've heard various clips of him. So I think if someone's not claiming to be a Christian, then I generally, don't feel I need to, give the benefit of the doubt or whatever. I don't think we can judge how Christian someone is because we don't understand their relationship with Jesus or a journey of faith. I completely agree. That's generally why I don't say that I don't believe someone's a Christian if they're saying that they are. I believe what he said was out of line about hating opponents. That's typical Trump. He makes jokes when he shouldn't. I would say it wasn't a joke. I wouldn't see that as a joke. I would see that more as him expressing his personal philosophy. So I think with Trump, if, for example, with the lawfare things, a load of people take him to court over possibly spurious cases, and he feels really victimized, probably rightly, absolutely rightly. So how does he respond? He wants to get his own back. Now, okay, there's, in politics, in life in general, there are situations where, you're in a fight, basically. You're in a battle, and in politics in particular, you are in a battle with the other side and you're trying to defeat them one way or another. But on the other hand, there should be coming into that an idea of graciousness and forgiveness, and basically just to not be stirring up hatred, and to still want the best for your opponents one way or another. So I guess the key thing I would say is Trump, as far as I'm aware, doesn't claim to be a Christian. If he did, then I wouldn't be saying Trump's not a Christian. In terms of like his pro-life views, I don't quite know what he really believes, but has he been a pro-life force? Yes, he has. So that's a big plus for me. Transgender issue, I mean, it's fantastic. Just get straight to the heart of the matter, and it's taken some very positive action about it. Religious freedom, it's been great. So a lot of things I'm very, very positive about there. Okay, I've done the wrong thing. Let's take that one off, bring the slides back on. Trump says he supports NATO members shooting down Russian aircraft breaching airspace. I was talking to someone about this the other day and saying, basically, I agree. Because what happens currently with the military situation is if Russia sends some bombers flying towards UK airspace, the UK has to scramble jets to be ready to intercept them. Now, you have to do that before they enter our airspace, otherwise you're too late. So if you want to impose a massive cost on an enemy, basically impose a big cost on them and frighten them, you fly your bombers at them and then turn around at the last minute. And Britain has to keep scrambling fighters to go up to meet them. Now, that's a pretty hostile and irresponsible thing for Russia to be doing. And they've actually gone further recently, like flying drones over NATO airspace and actually flying fighter jets over as well. Now, once upon a time, you could say, okay, that's a mistake. It was cloudy and the pilots were confused. I mean, now that's much less believable. If this keeps going on and Russia keeps doing this, because the problem is, if Russia keeps doing this and the NATO ends up thinking, well, that's what Russia does. So if they send some bombers and they fly into our airspace, at what point do we shoot them down? Well, they flew in for 20 minutes last week, so they've flown in for 25 minutes. So see, it becomes more and more dangerous situation. So I tend to be with Trump on this one. It's got to be made clear to Russia that if this happens, this keeps happening, then these airplanes are going to be shot down. Because militarily, it's necessary. You can't have a potential enemy testing you and basically laying the groundwork for a surprise attack by making you used to having your airspace invaded and not responding to it. So I think drastic action might be necessary there. Okay, important announcement. Family Party Conference. Get your tickets, 8th of November in Glasgow. Join us for the whole day. It's a whole day this year. And do join us in the evening as well, if you can, for a dinner at 6:30. So look at our social media. You can get your tickets now. It would be great to see you. Right, I'll talk about this, then I'll finish just very quickly. This was just something I saw on Twitter. Now, rape crime reports. In the year 2000, you can see the statistics there. Then you've got the statistics from 2023. So England and Wales went up from 8,500 to 68,000. Germany, 8,000 to 39,000. France, 7,500 to 42,000. Poland, 2,400 to 1,127. So astronomical increases in England, Germany, and France. Very substantial decline in Poland. Why is that? People say, well, it might be because of greater awareness, greater willingness to report. Some of these crimes reported might have happened many years ago. That might be a very significant factor. But I think a lot of people are looking at this and saying a disproportionate amount of sexual crime is committed by basically recent immigrants with different cultures, etc. And the results are quite stark. Now, I think this is the sort of area where it's very difficult. It's easy to take these statistics and to inflame people with them and to stir up generalized anti-immigration feeling, which is very unhelpful. But on the other hand, looking at these statistics, something's going very seriously wrong in England and Wales, Germany and France. I think the statistics for Scotland are very similar as well. Something is going very wrong, and there needs to be drastic action to understand it completely and to do whatever it takes to sort this out. Because I say those figures are utterly, utterly appalling. Right. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your comments. I will see you next week. I'm going to make a video soon about asylum seekers, so-called, who come over on small boats. And I'm going to try and look at, actually, why do they come? They're called asylum seekers, which technically is right because they're seeking asylum. So that is a correct official designation. But why do they really come? Well, how do you know? I mean, asking them isn't much use, really, because you're not going to get an honest answer. So how can we know why these people are actually coming? So I'm going to make a video about that because there is some research and some interesting ways of trying to understand that. So I will make a video about that before too long. Keep your eyes open. Right, so thanks everyone. Get your conference tickets and see you next week. Right, good night.